Hello, beautiful souls. My name is Jessie, and welcome back to another episode of Rewired to Inspire. This show where we'll dive into self-love, learn tangible ways to rewire the brain, and discovering your soul's purpose. The goal of Rewired to Inspire is to encourage listeners to begin doing the hard work, to get curious and open to maximizing your life. Our mindset shapes how we live. Depending on life events, traumas, and personal experiences, our mindsets are all vastly different. However, one thing we all have in common is the ability to rewire our mind, to change the narrative, and to pivot our lives. I hope you leave each episode with the belief that you are so worthy to live a life true to you. I look forward to chatting with you every single Tuesday and Thursday and helping you grow exponentially in all areas of your life. Without further ado, here's today's episode. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back for another episode of Rewire to Inspire. I am your host, Jessie Brown, and I am so excited to be jumping on the microphone with you all for episode number 111. If you are watching video or if you notice that I'm kind of having a hard time speaking, I think I popped a rib out or pulled a muscle in my shoulder, and so I'm having a really hard time getting comfortable. So if I'm a little bit more jiggity than usual, that is what's going on. But nonetheless, we keep momentum, we keep going, we show up imperfectly, and that's all that we can do. And so I am super excited, you guys, for today's episode because talking about trauma-informed content, all of the above is a huge passion of mine. And honestly, what I believe is a huge part of why I am here is to share from my experiences, to share from some of my clients that I've had experiences, and to just shed light on trauma, on how it affects the brain, how it affects the body, how it lives within us, and how it shapes who we are and who we become and how we live our life. And honestly, trauma is something that should be taught to us in school, what our survival mechanisms are, how it affects us, how it can play a role in our lives. But unfortunately, the reality is that as of right now, it is not. And so that is the goal of my podcast, is to provide that psychoeducation, provide awareness, provide knowledge on these things that we wish, and I wish, we would have learned growing up. Because I think that education holds power, awareness holds power, and if we don't have the awareness or knowledge about something that affects all of us, so many of us walk around feeling like something is wrong with us. Our body is out to get us, our mind is out to get us, nothing seems to be going our way. And so that brings me to the topic of today's episode, which is happening to you versus happening for you. So I wanted to start off today's episode by kind of doing a little bit of a story / just a recap of how I've been doing, because I think that today's episode came up because it's something that I've been learning to embrace for myself. So recently, I've really been just wanting to tell my brain to stop. Stop talking to me for a second. Stop communicating for a second. Stop making me feel anxious for a minute. Stop giving me sad thoughts. Stop X, Y, and Z. I've just been wanting to yell at my own mind to make some of the things stop that are going on. And I've been feeling super overwhelmed lately. I've been feeling really tired. I've been feeling anxious. And the one thing that has been helpful for me, again, through all of this, is what I'm sharing with you all today, which is that the things that are happening right now and that I'm experiencing, my body's sending me those signals for a reason. My body's communicating with me in that way for a reason. And until I was able to pause and reflect on that and really just find gratitude, I was having a really hard time. And so my goal of today is for you listening to leave to really be able to honor what your body is communicating and to know that your brain and your body's job is to protect you. It's to keep you safe. It's to keep you alive. It's to keep you to get you to the next day. And I think oftentimes we forget that because we have all these body sensations and these thoughts and these experiences, and we can forget to thank our one thing that is keeping us going. You know, I often think all the time we would never let our phone battery die. And if we do, we're pretty quick to plug it back in. But how often are we checking in with our own body's percentage in a way? Is our body dwindling out? Is our battery depleting? Are we filling it back up in the proper way? Or are we letting it hit zero and then staying there, staying shut off, staying disconnected, staying in overwhelm, staying in stress? You know, and so I just felt super pulled to share this with you all. And if anything, for today, I just want you to, if you get one thing out of today, it's that I want you to look at your body as, instead of it doing a lot of things to hurt you, know it's actually doing a lot of things to protect you. A large reason why, again, this came up for me is because I talk about my old job quite often, where I worked in a sexual assault healing center, and my job was to provide psychoeducation to clients coming into our workplace. Psychoeducation basically means providing education about the mind, about how the mind and body are connected, and it was really just about explaining trauma and how it lives in the body and the mind, and giving that educational piece behind it, right? And so the thing is what's happening is when I was to give them that knowledge and that awareness, it would give them grace in a way, because it allows them to shift what they're feeling, to know that they're not alone, to say, hey, you're not alone in experiencing a lot of anxiety. You're not alone in experiencing overwhelm. You're not alone in that you responded that way during a traumatic event. This actually happens to a lot of us. But until I stepped into that role, I thought that so much of what I was experiencing in life was only happening to me. And how often do we do that? We think, I'm unique in this. I'm the only one that could ever experience this or know what this is feeling like. And yes, all of our experiences are unique, and they are what shape each and every one of us. However, are we looking at it from a place of I am alone or I am unique? Because we are all unique, but we're not all alone. And so I wanted to provide you guys today with some examples of times where we might be experiencing some things where we think our body is out to get us and our mind is out to get us, but it's actually just keeping us safe. And there's obviously thousands, millions, trillions, maybe even, of examples of this, because again, we're all unique and we all have such unique experiences. But this was just kind of 5 things that I had gathered that really came up for me when I was brainstorming of times that we see this a lot. The first thing is that we're out of our window of tolerance. I just got off of book club where we're reading a book called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. I've talked about it, I think, on the last 4 episodes on here. It is an amazing book, but it is a heavier book. And basically in the chapter that we're reading right now, we talk about hyper and hypo arousal. So basically being out of our window of tolerance that I talk to you guys about all the time. I have an episode specifically about the window of tolerance. I'll make sure I link it down below if you haven't checked out that episode. I definitely encourage you to. But it is often when we are out of our window of tolerance that we can experience things and sensations and experiences and thoughts where we feel like our body is out to get us. We can feel overwhelmed. We can feel like we're shutting down. We can feel like we can't be present. We can feel a lot of pain in our body. We're feeling, like we can't pay attention in class. We're not remembering things. We're super angry. We're super agitated. We feel like we're super, super overreacting to something that seems small. These are all signs of a nervous system that is overwhelmed. But if we don't realize that, we can just start to become really hurtful with ourselves. And the thing is I see this all the time where somebody, gets super, super overwhelmed, and then they get angry at themselves, and then it turns into shame, and then it turns into belittling oneself, and then self-hate comes in, and it's this whole toxic cycle. So my goal is, whenever we're experiencing those things, how can we pause and ask ourselves, okay, from a trauma-informed perspective, what do I think is happening right now? Because we're all going to have impulse reactions to things. We're all going to feel all of our emotions at different times. That is normal. That's what makes us who we are. But again, when we are out of our window of tolerance for so long, are we able to communicate with ourselves, this is likely a trauma response? Do we even have that awareness and knowledge that it's potentially a trauma response? Because I lived so much of my life thinking, I don't have trauma. I never experienced any of that. And it's like, hello, where were you? I was disconnected. Of course I didn't realize that. And also, because we don't learn about this in school, as I mentioned, it's easy to just not know where it comes from and think that something is just wrong with you. But with proper support, with proper education and awareness, we can rewire how we view things that our body does, again, for us, not to us. So that's the first thing, is if you're out of your window of tolerance, I will link that episode below. I will link a digital asset below of what the window of tolerance looks like. But basically it's when we're out of our window, meaning basically all it means is when we're not in our homeostasis, self state in our body, present, grounded, connected, we're out of that we can be acting out of impulse and out of a way that might not be super rational. And so those are times where we might be feeling like our body is out to get us and isn't protecting us, which in reality, it's actually trying to hyper protect you in those times by trying to keep you safe. My second point really leaks off of the window of tolerance, but that's when we're triggered. And then I guess my third one kind of does too. When we're triggered or overwhelmed, I'll lump them together. That can also be a time when we feel like things are happening to us, not for us. Because the thing is when we're triggered or we're super, super overwhelmed, what happens is our amygdala, that part of our brain that is like that bell in our school, that alarm system, is going off saying something is wrong, something's not right, there's potentially a threat, something's going on. And when that happens, it's our mind's job to turn our thinking brain offline. And so when that happens, our body takes over, it's acting out of impulse, doing what it thinks is best for us. So it is exactly in those times that we are sent into our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. When we are in one of those 4 responses, it can be really hard to feel like you're in your body, to feel like you're in control, to feel like you have a say. And again, depending on the severity of what's going on around you, if you are physically being attacked by a bear, for example, it's probably good that our brain kind of checks out, right? It's not something that we really want to be super present for. But the opposite can happen is if we've undergone that, let's say that bear attack and we survived and we're now walking in the woods, if our attack happened in the woods and we hear, let's say, a crackle in the trees, our brain's instantly going to go to, we are under attack again, we have to prepare, we have to disconnect. This happens to us all the time, even socially. If someone has harmed us with words, psychologically, words can kind of do the same thing. They can make our mind remember danger. This happened to me after my basketball experience that I've shared with you guys, where I had a coach that was very belittling with his words. Certain tones of voices, certain range vocal cords of men's voices will overwhelm my body into thinking there's danger, so it gets ready to fight. In those moments, if nothing is happening, because this has happened to me before in work meetings, on Zoom calls, on trainings, just when I'm at a coffee shop, this can happen. And I'm sitting there going, frig sakes, Jessie, like, why are you overwhelmed right now? Why are you so anxious? But because I'm having that trauma-informed perspective in my brain, I'm going, okay, this makes sense. What do we need to do to now calm ourselves down? Which I'm going to get into some things that we can do in just a moment.
I know exactly what it's like to not know where to turn, to feel alone, helpless, and stuck. My goal as a coach is to help clients from a trauma-informed perspective see your worth and develop self-belief so you may chase your dreams and trust your intuition to live the most aligned, fulfilling life possible. If you're looking to elevate your life to the next level but aren't sure where to start, I would absolutely love to connect. If you're feeling pulled or curious, please use the link in the show notes below to book your free call. I look forward to connecting and supporting you on your own unique journey.
But when we're triggered or overwhelmed, one of the biggest things that we can do is notice that it's happening as soon as possible. Again, that can be really hard if we're disconnected, but the more we practice, the better we can get at it. But I encourage you listening even right now to think of, when is the last time you maybe feel like you acted out of impulse, you overreacted, you did something that after you were like, oh, that wasn't really right, or that wasn't really me. It's likely because you were triggered or you were overwhelmed. And the more that we can notice that it's happening, where it's happening, what our triggers are, who does this typically happen around, how long does it last, bringing awareness to it can be super helpful. And as always, seeking therapy is going to be huge. If you've undergone something traumatic, regardless, therapy is great for anybody. We've all undergone quote unquote little t trauma, meaning maybe not a horrendous event, but we've all experienced trauma in some way, shape, or form. And so therefore, I believe we can all benefit from therapy, whether we want to admit that or realize that or not. It is beneficial for all of us. But those are my next 2 points, that sometimes we can feel like our body is out to get us, but it's actually trying to keep us safe, is if we are in a state of being triggered or overwhelmed. The third one kind of chimes into this, but it is sudden overwhelm. That is like those little T's that I mentioned. If something happens that is super unexpected, that overwhelms our system, again, the definition of trauma is anything that overwhelms one's ability to cope. So let's say, for example, you're driving and you almost hit the person in front of you because they slam on their brakes. A part of your brain is going to go into overdrive of, oh my gosh, I almost hit them. This could have happened. Like, okay, we got to check in. Is everybody safe? Is everybody good? And it's scanning super quick. Our mind is always scanning and taking in so much more stimuli than I can even begin to process for you. It is constantly taking in new things. And so if we have a sudden overwhelming experience, our body and our mind can take over in those moments, and we can start to process them after and be like, why didn't I respond in this way? Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I say that? Why? I used to see this all the time with domestic violence and sexual assault survivors. They would say, why didn't I run? Why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do the other thing? On reverse, why did I do this? Why did I do that? We have to find compassion of knowing that our mind chooses what our fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response is for us based on what it thinks is going to keep us most safe. We do not choose if we're going to fight. We do not choose if we're going to flight. We do not choose if we're going to freeze. We do not choose if we're going to fawn. Our brain chooses for us on which one it thinks is most optimal to keep us safe in that moment. For example, if we're in the woods with a bear, our first initial instinct might be to freeze until it gets to be too late in our minds, like we don't have a choice, we need to fight. Often another example is, let's say, a predator, a human being, let's say you're kidnapped, for example. Your first initial response might be to fight. Fighting doesn't work, so you lean into fawning. Fawning is basically complying with what that person is saying in hopes to trick them, get out of it, basically avoid getting hurt. And then people always say, why was I so nice? Why did I comply? Why did I go with what they were saying? You did it because that's what you thought at that time was going to keep you the most safe. And like I always share with my clients, the fact that you're sitting in front of me right now telling me this story tells me that it worked. It doesn't always make it easy. In fact, it doesn't make it easy because now we have to sit with that and contemplate. But I always like to just give them that permission for a second of, but your body did what it needed to do to get you right here. And that to me is what's most important. Now we get to do the work of kind of going back, revisiting that, giving ourselves compassion that everything we did in those moments, we did what we thought was best. And that is my goal, is I want you to take a deep breath if there's an experience that you can think of where maybe you didn't respond in the way that now logically thinking, because again, our thinking brain goes offline. So now sitting there, your thinking brain is back online. It's going to tell you, you shoulda, coulda, woulda, right? But it's like, no brain, I couldn't. You didn't give me that ability because I know you love me and you're trying to keep me safe. The last example I have for you guys is inner child experiences. This is one that I think leaks into a lot of things in our life and is definitely something that I have been feeling lately. I was on that book club today and I kind of had a realization for myself of, I have spent so much of my life in that hyper-arousal state, that volcano state, that fight state, that overwhelmed state, that now that I'm finally living by myself, there's no one around me, it is calm, I'm with my thoughts, I'm with my body. It's almost like my body decided to just boop, drop down and put me into the hypo state. So I've been feeling extra depressed, extra anxious, extra overwhelmed, extra all of these things, and I'm like, what the heck is this? And so because my mind always likes to go to, how can I give myself compassion and grace? I started digging. And that's one thing I realized is that because my inner child state was constantly on the verge of what's going to happen next, what's going to be said next, psychologically didn't really feel safe. Now that I feel safer, all these things are coming up and all these sensations are coming up. And so I'm working now to come back to my window of tolerance, which can be a really hard thing to do, but we do that through grounding and through consistency, and again, through seeking proper support. So the 5 things that I thought of that really stuck off the page for me of times that your body can take over and you can feel like it's out to get you, but it's actually protecting you, is you're out of your window of tolerance, you're triggered, you're overwhelmed, you have sudden overwhelm, or inner child experiences, all of which are valid, all of which make you who you are, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I hope you know how worthy you are to do the work. And even if right now maybe isn't the safest place to do that, I hope that you know that it's never too late. It is never too late to do the work and to start healing. Neuroplasticity in our brain, that is its job, to allow us to rewire itself. And yes, it's better to start working on it sooner than later. However, I just want you to know that if you've been suppressing this for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever it is never too late. I remember I had this one client. It makes me emotional to talk about because she has since passed. She was a residential school survivor. I worked with her at the hospital in Fort McMurray. She was in her 80s. I believe she was like 85 years old. Both of her legs were amputated from my perspective due to severe trauma in her body. And she was just one of the most magnificent people and bravest people that I've ever met, to the fact that she was 85 years old and she told me she wanted to heal a little bit of herself before she left this earth. That gave me goosebumps to say because I think about her sometimes, and she reminds me that it is never too late to heal and to do the work. Literally in the hospital, battling cancer, had both of her legs amputated, severely, severely traumatized woman, still wants to do the work and try her darnest to smile every day and to just be a light for everybody else. And I do truly think she's one of the clients. You know, we always say in social work and in therapy world, it's like, you always remember certain clients that really just make things click for you. They're like a mirror almost. She was that for me. And she's a large reason why I'm still doing my podcast, is because I'm like, I want other people to feel that same permission, that courage that she gave me that day to start healing. Because I was only 21 at the time. Imagine that. And I'm like, I'm too old to do the work. It's like, whoa, girl, like, you're only 21. You're only now coming out of some of your traumas. It's like, I think you're just at the beginning. And so I changed that, and I want to be able to change that for you guys. And so now, what are some things we can do? And I want you to take a moment before I jump into that to just check in with self, because sometimes even talking about these things can be overwhelming. And I'm going to put a disclaimer in my bio for this episode because it is a little bit of a harder one. And I know that some of us listening were like, yeah, what do you mean? This is super easy. But for some person, that could be really overwhelming to even say the word trauma. And so I just want you guys to know that it's okay and to just take a moment to maybe take a deep breath. So now let's talk about, some uplifting things, some things that we can do about this, some things to, find compassion for self. And that is my first point for you guys of how we can begin to shift how we view these things. It is finding that self-compassion, that our brains are wired in a way purposefully to keep us safe. And so the more that we can really find compassion for ourselves and love on ourselves, it just makes the journey a little less hard. I always say, like, healing is like walking up a mountain with a backpack. Having compassion makes that backpack a little bit lighter. It gives us just permission to keep going up it without it feeling so heavy. The second thing, you're doing it right now. Educating yourself, getting awareness, learning, evolving. The more we learn about why we respond the way we respond, the more we're able to get ahead of it and find compassion again for ourselves in those moments. If we know why we're responding in a certain way, it allows us to look at it differently, to do the work, versus not knowing, turning inwards, building shame, and it actually getting worse and heightening, and we build protectors and all those things. So educating ourselves. The third one, which is going to leak into our window of tolerance, but that is to ground and to calm yourself. The more that we can ground ourselves, meaning coming back to our body and calming ourselves, the more we're not only able to widen our window of tolerance. Sorry, my cat was getting in the way there. She's loving my new setup by the window. If you're watching video, you can also see I changed my setup a little bit, probably why I threw my shoulder out. But anyways, grounding yourself, coming back to your body, doing our 5 senses, smelling an essential oil, feeling the texture of something, having a fidget toy. I have my little stress wiener dog here that I like to play with when I'm on calls if I'm overwhelmed. That just brings me back to my body, focusing on the temperature of the room. What do you hear? Just certain things that we can use to calm ourselves. Going to therapy and doing the healing work is kind of an obvious one, but I wanted to throw it on there. Work with somebody that can help provide you that psychoeducation. Find a therapist that works from a trauma-informed lens so that they're able to give you that proper education. Breath work. Our breath holds so much power, and I know I've done podcasts on this and I talk about this all the time, but 6 intentional deep breaths can quite literally reset your nervous system, which can quite literally change the trajectory of your day and of your life. The way we breathe matters. It determines how much cortisol is released. It determines how quick we're shifting from our parasympathetic into our sympathetic nervous system, going from our calm state to our survival state. Breathing holds is honestly the biggest superpower that I think we all have is our breath work, and it matters so much. And the last thing that I have for you guys is to check in with yourself daily. Checking in with ourselves. I've been journaling. I'm on day 20 today of consistent journaling. And every day I write down a little blurb, like a word blurb of how I'm feeling. I write down today's emotions, body sensations, gratitude, and intentions for the day. Doing just that allows me to backtrack how I'm feeling on certain days. And what's been interesting is on the days that I'm feeling lower, I notice that my body's having more sensations, which I knew coincidentally was going to be there. But it was fascinating for me to actually have the data in front of me to see on the days that I'm emotionally lower, my body responds with neck pain, with headaches, with bowel issues, with all these things. And it's like, obviously that makes sense. My body's not working as optimally as it has to. It's shifting into a survival state. How can I calm myself down externally so my body can calm down internally? So you guys, that is episode number 111 of Rewire to Inspire. I truly hope you guys all enjoy. This truly is some of my favorite content that I can do for you guys, is providing education on things that I have learned / wish that I learned, but I can now teach to you guys, to the next generation, to youth, that truly empowers me and inspires me so much. So thank you guys for tuning in to Thursday's episode. Is going to be all about kind of the same thing, but it's about, are you actually giving your soul what it needs, is really what I'm going to be talking about. And are we giving ourselves what we think we need or what we actually need? So stay tuned for Thursday's episode. I think you guys are going to really like it. But nonetheless, thank you guys so much. All the love. I look forward to chatting with you then. Bye, you guys. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's episode of Rewire to Inspire. I absolutely love connecting with you all, so make sure you're following me on Instagram. I am at JessieBrown13. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to leave a review or share with someone you think would enjoy. I look forward to chatting with you all next episode. And remember, get out of your head and into your heart.